Already this morning, over and over and over again, I think if there's one theme I've heard, and I think it's an appropriate theme, is that we are in the middle of a current cultural climate of great opportunity. Are you hearing the same thing? Great opportunity. I was in the UK for 5 weeks in May, and that's where they released the data from the Bible Society about what they're now calling the quiet revival. We're seeing the same kind of thing now starting to happen across the United States, as you heard, which really they're referring to as an awakening. You noticed Ted's reticence to call it a revival. Revival is something that comes up from within the church because they're so on fire. It's not really that. It's actually an awakening of the culture. Someone explained it to me. It's like the culture has become so toxic, so bad, that like the fish are jumping into the boat. That's what's going on. There's an awakening that's happening. So while there is this awakening, at the same time, there's great confusion in the church. And I want to get after this. The Barna research will tell us, this goes back a couple of years, that when it comes to evangelism, 47% of the people in the church actually say it's wrong to evangelize. They say it's wrong to evangelize. And at the same time, when they're asked a different question, 65% will say they should be a witness. It's wrong to evangelize, I should be a witness. Sounds like people are confused, doesn't it? So while there's this awakening happening in culture, there's confusion in the church. And I think as a pastor, and I've pastored like many of you for the last 30 plus years, I think we're asking the question, okay, what do we do? We have this great opportunity now for the first time really in our lifetimes. What do we do? And maybe the answer is, let's just not miss the obvious. Let's not make it harder than it is. Let's not miss the obvious. It reminds me of a funny event that happened. I was at, my wife Sue and I got invited over to our friend Jim and Julie's house. They invited us over for dinner. So we go over to their house for dinner, and Jim and Julie and Sue are all in the kitchen. They're hanging out and doing some stuff. I wandered into the dining room, and in the dining room there's this print on the wall. This print, it's a picture, it's a print of a painting, and it was just spectacular, just beautiful. I was really taken with it. And so I called back to Jim and Julie and Sue, my wife, in the kitchen. I said, wow, I just really, really like this print. And I hear my friend Jim start to laugh. And then I hear Julie start chuckling. And then my wife Sue, she's losing it. And I'm like, what? Because I'm just paying him a compliment. I just really like this print. So Sue leaves the kitchen, comes out, says to me, she says, well, Dave, you should like it. We gave it to them. And then she added this. She goes, and furthermore, we have the exact same print in our house. True story, all right? Sometimes you just kind of miss the obvious, right? And I guess as a pastor to pastor, or as a church leader to church leader, I want us to not miss the obvious, all right? 8 times in the Bible, it says, here's our job. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbors yourself, 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 love your neighbors yourself. Help me out. What's it say? That's exact. Let's don't miss the obvious, all right? What do we do in this great time of awakening? What do we do? I was listening to Arthur Brooks speak. If you don't know Arthur Brooks, Harvard professor, Christian researcher on the topic of happiness. He gives this long lectureship and comes down to this grand crescendo at the very end, and he says, do you want to know what the research tells us about how to be happy? And everybody's leaning in, right? And he says, love your neighbor. And then he says, and do you want to know what the research says about how we can create a happy society together? And you have a hunch about what's coming. And he says this, love your neighbor. Let's don't miss the obvious. See, what I want to share with you just for like the next 25 minutes is as a pastor, I want to make this as practical as I possibly can. I want this to be something you're going to go, okay, you know what? I can start doing this like next week. This I can put to work. This I can implement. And what I'm going to tell you, okay, is not something new. Because quite frankly, if I told you something new, it would be heresy, right? That's what heresy is, right? Something that's new. It's not actually in the Bible. But here's what I do want to tell you, okay? Not something new, but instead how. The new part's going to be the how. How we can actually love our neighbors. And how you can leave this place, go back to your churches, back into your networks, back into your denominations, and how you can equip the people in your church to love their neighbors. And furthermore, we're going to spend a little bit of time on how you can actually create a culture. So it's not just you and a few that you equip, but it becomes a culture in your church where here's who we are. We're a group of people that do what? Talk to me. See, we're not going to miss the obvious this session, are we? We're not going to miss it. All right? This goes back over a decade, and it was a pivotal moment for me. I ran across this absolutely fascinating study, and it was just simply titled, Blessers versus Converters. Blessers versus Converters. The study was based on 2 teams of missionaries that both went to Thailand. They both went to Thailand with 2 distinctly different missional strategies. The converters, on the one hand, they said they went with the sole intention of trying to convert people. They were going to save souls, evangelize people. The second went with the intention, we're just going to bless people. We're going to be a blessing. Wherever we go, when God gives us opportunity, we want to be a blessing to those folks. The study followed them for 2 years. Made 2 very important observations. First, they discovered that the blessers, their presence in the community, resulted in tremendous amounts of social good. It was actually a better place to live because they were there. What you call social capital was created. The converters, there was real no noticeable difference. Here was a second observation. The second observation was that the blessers saw 100 people over the course of those 2 years come to know, find, and follow Jesus. The blessers did, and the converters only 2. 50-1. And the bottom line of that study, this is the way they kind of punctuated it, was this, that the best way to accomplish the Jesus mission is to be a blesser. And for me at that point in time, I began to take that and I began to, once again, my brother and I began to look at the life of Jesus. And we began to discover, that's kind of what Jesus did. Everywhere he went, he tried to be a blessing. In fact, he even had the nickname that he was called a friend of what? A friend of sinners. That's exactly right. And the more I studied his life, you begin to see there was a series of kind of missional practices. And we took these missional practices and just kind of put 5 of them together that Jesus used over and over again to befriend people, to bless people. And we put them in a very simple acronym that the people in my church, the people in your church, the people in the marketplace that we heard about, right? Well, man, what a great talk. How do we mobilize those people in the marketplace that they can do every day to love their neighbors? And they simply just spelled the B.L.E.S.S practices. B.L.E.S.S. Let me give them to you real quick. And this is the way we kind of teach people at our church. The B stands for begin with prayer. Okay, that's a little bit of a stretch, isn't it? B, begin with prayer. But that's the place you want to begin. And I thought it was very well pointed out by Mike, okay? I would encourage people to pick their context. Because when we say neighborhood, you could say your neighborhood's where you live. Yes, your actual kind of physical neighborhood, your house is where you live, or where you work. He made a great case for that. That could be the people you want to bless, or even where you play. It might be where you do recreation, where you hang out, a team you're on. But begin with prayer is how you both discover your mission and how you do the mission. And again, this is what Jesus did. Go back to Luke chapter 6. When Jesus starts his mission, what does it say? He went on the mountain and he prayed. And what we have to always remember is this. God's already at work. There's a whole world he wants to bless. And if we're not sure where to start, tell your people as they're driving to work, just begin to pray for the neighbors as you drive past each of their house. As you walk into your office place, if it's an office where you have offices or carols, you should begin to pray for each desk. If it's a work site, begin to pray for each person there. Or a lot of folks, they'll actually go on prayer walks, and you begin to pray for each home. Every home in your neighborhood, you begin with prayer. That's where you begin. And as you begin to pray for people, then the L stands for listen. When you read the Gospels, again, you're going to discover something about Jesus. Jesus, it's so fascinating, was constantly asking questions and then listening. And I think we make a mistake sometimes as Christians. We're more known for our talking, right, than we are our listening. And look at Jesus in Luke chapter 18. Luke chapter 18, he doesn't just assume that the blind man wants to see. What does he do? He looks at him and he says, okay, what do you want me to do? He asks the question and then gives him the dignity to respond and request what he wants. It was actually the inventor of the stethoscope that said to doctors, he would say, listen to your patients. They will tell you how to heal them. So B, be men with prayer. L, you listen. E, okay, this is my favorite one. It's something that many of you already are experts at, right? E stands for eating. You're probably getting a little hungry about now, aren't you? You're going, we should put this into practice. We will in a little bit. And again, I love the story of Zacchaeus, right? What a great story. I mean, because before lunch, his life is a mess, and he doesn't have salvation. It says afterwards, salvation has come to this house today. A lunch can do that. Think about this in your own experience. Isn't this true? That the thing that can most change an acquaintance faster than almost anything else to a friendship is a meal. Isn't that right? Think about you all. How many married folks? I bet we got how many married folks got in there? Yeah, okay, a whole bunch of married folks. I bet for a lot of you go back and you go like, when did that romance? When did that all start? You could probably name the place, and I bet 90% of us would say, oh, it was over a meal. For me, it was Aurelio's Pizza. Anybody know Aurelio's Pizza? There you go. Yeah, that'll kick off a romance. Am I right? That's where I'm like Sue. I think maybe I got a chance. There's something about it. And so think about this too. How many times do you eat every day? How many times do you eat? Meals. 7? 7. Okay. That's a lot for a skinny guy. Nicely done. Let's say 3. Typical people say 3. 3 meals a day, right? 7. Holy smokes. 3 meals a day, 7 days a week. Think about that. That's 21 missional opportunities. That's how you coach your people. And here's the thing I love about the B.L.E.S.S practices. It's not something you add to your life. This is how you live your life. You don't have to show up at the church on Tuesday night to do this. This is how you love your neighbor. Alan Hirsch and Lance Ford, they wrote a book called Right Here, Right Now. And I love this. They talk about the power of eating and sharing meals. They said, sharing meals together on a regular basis is one of the most sacred practices we can engage in as believers. Missional hospitality is a tremendous opportunity to extend the kingdom of God. I love this next line. Listen to this. We can literally eat our way into the kingdom of God. Can I get an amen? If every Christian household regularly invited a stranger, think about this particularly today, a stranger or a poor person into their home for a meal once a week, we could literally change the world by eating. How about that? So here's how it works. And they kind of build on each other. You'll notice this. You begin by praying for folks in your neighborhood where you live, work, or play. You're praying for them. And I'm telling you, it begins to change how you feel about those people. As you get opportunities to interact, you're leading by listening. Listening feels like love to people. It feels like love. And as you listen to those folks, and as you get the opportunity, and it might be a Starbucks, it might be dessert, it might be a meal. Or maybe you do like, you know it's Jesus? Jesus invited himself over to his house. Try to figure that one out, right? But whatever it is, all of a sudden now, it's like you're becoming friends. I kind of tease people sometimes. I say, listen, this is like a remedial course on how to make friends with people. You pray for them, you listen, you invite them to a meal, right? If there's any single folks here, okay, I don't know, I've probably got a few single folks. This is a great way to get a date, by the way, right? You pray for them, you listen, ask them out to Aurelio's. Okay. Now here's what will happen though as you do that. They will tell you, because now you're becoming friends, they will tell you how to love them. Because you're praying for them. You're listening to them. You're now actually having meals together. They'll tell you what's going on with their kids. They'll tell you what's happening in their marriage. They'll tell you what's going on with their finances. They'll tell you what's happening with their job. They will tell you how to love them. and then you love them the way they need and want to be loved. This is how Jesus worked. He said, I didn't come to be served, but to serve. So that first S is serve. And then the last S, after you begin with prayer and you listen, you eat, and you serve, is story. And again, it's not that proclamation is not important. Proclamation is very important. It's just that maybe it doesn't have to be first. And maybe what we coach our people to do is, hey, you pay the relational rent, begin with prayer, listen, eat, serve, and then when you tell the story about Jesus, how Jesus changed your life, it'll have a lot more value. Now, we've been doing this for like the last 12 years at Community Christian Church. And I'm telling you, I am absolutely convinced this is how, this is a great way for how to love your neighbor. This is a great way for how. I want to get really practical with you for a little bit. How you can show people God's love. How you can introduce people to Jesus. I get a chance to interact with church planners all the time. Andy and I were just talking about this. And one of the things, and I would tell every church leader, if I could only give you two pieces of advice, I'd do these two things. Number one, you want to introduce the B.L.E.S.S practices. Train your people to do the B.L.E.S.S practices because that's kind of like your sending strategy. But then you also, I'd encourage it, do Alpha. How many of you are familiar with Alpha? Okay, if you're not, you really ought to check this out. Do Alpha, because Alpha then becomes your gathering strategy. And you do those two things, I'm telling you, talk about Amplify, that is a great evangelistic strategy. Okay, so basically I've kind of given you the first half of the talk here. Here's how to love your neighbor. Now, if there's one thing better than one person loving their neighbor, right? What's even better is how you create a culture in your whole church. How do you create a culture in your whole church where our whole church just gets it? That's who we are. We're a people who love our neighbors. And culture, that's one of your greatest assets as a leader. Because when you got a culture going, it works 24/7, nonstop. It's way more powerful than vision or strategy. Because culture is continually reinforcing the values that you hold dear that come straight from Scripture over and over and over again. Let me give you a simple definition for culture. This was given to me some time back, and I've really hung on to this, and I teach it wherever I get a chance. Culture is this. Culture is spontaneous, repeated patterns of behavior. Spontaneous, repeated patterns of behavior. When you begin to see this loving your neighbor thing happening over and over and over again, then you have a culture. Let me share with you a story. This comes straight out of the B.L.E.S.S book. We have a ton of stories in there of people who put this to work. It's about a couple named Brooke and Justin. Let me just read it to you. It says, the house next door to Brooke and Justin was like a revolving door. Revolving door of brand new neighbors coming in and out. Over a 5-year span, a stream of people rented the house and then just as quickly would disappear and move out. With each new neighbor came the excitement of getting to know them, but that was quickly followed by the letdown of a quick departure. Then a couple moved in and stayed. Brooke and Justin began to pray for them. They looked for an opportunity to connect, but this new couple wasn't interested. They would come in from work, they'd drive into their garage, they wouldn't see them again until next morning when the garage door would open and they'd drive away. There'd be an occasional, how are you? Followed by, I'm fine, but that was as far as the relationship got. And then that couple moved. Brooke and Justin were frustrated, but they prayed. They said, God, you know this house. This house right next door is vacant again. Please give us some neighbors that we can do life with and that we can love. Well, another young couple, Lauren and Quentin, moved in. So Brooke and Justin went next door, welcomed them to the neighborhood, started intentionally using the B.L.E.S.S practices. The next week, they invited their new neighbors over for a cookout. The meal included long conversations about jobs, favorite sports teams, restaurant recommendations, and it was a great time. They were becoming friends. When Brooke found out their new friends had not bought a lawnmower yet, she encouraged Justin, her husband, to mow their lawn whenever he mowed his own. He continued to do that every week without being asked, and it was hard for their new neighbors not to notice that their grass was magically shorter every weekend. Finally, Lauren asked Brooke, tell me, why are the two of you so different? Why do you always seem to go out of your way to help us? And Brooke began to share some of her story. It was not much later that Lauren came over and said, hey, I want to update you on something. Yeah, what's that, said Brooke. Well, Quentin and I have decided to stop renting. We want to buy this house. And we wanted you to know that the biggest reason we're buying this house is because of the neighbors. It was several weeks later that Quentin then crossed the lawn and told Justin, I just got some sad news. My uncle passed away suddenly. I got a lot of questions about death, eternity, God, and I know you have a faith. Could we talk for a little bit? And the two of them sat down in the front yard for a couple hours, and Justin led Quentin to Christ right there in his front yard. Is that awesome? The following Sunday, he baptized him with Brooke and Lauren in the church along with them. And Brooke would tell you this. It all started with us praying for that empty house, asking God to give us neighbors that we could love. And now, they're some of our very best friends. I mean, just quick commentary. Isn't that the kind of evangelism you'd like to do? The kind where you're going like, hey, I just made some new best friends. I love that story. Now, here's the question. If we're going to create a culture, how do we get that to happen over and over and over and over again, right? Because that's what we want, the spontaneous repeated pattern of behavior. How do we get that to happen over and over again where people are spontaneously just, oh, I got a new neighbor, I'm praying for them. I'm having meals with them. And when I get the opportunity, they ask me to serve them, I serve them. And then I even get a chance to share my story. I do that as well. How do you get that to happen? So I gave you a definition, spontaneous repeated patterns of behavior. Let me give you the three components. And as leaders, this is stuff you can grab a hold of. And just like the blessed practices you can begin to use, like next week, same thing with this. You can begin to do this to create a culture in your church this way. The first component, very important, is at the core are values. Values. Now, the values are really kind of two things. They're the convictions of your mind, okay? And they're always consistent with God's truth. And you have a conviction about Matthew 22:39. You have a conviction about that great commandment. And when you heard me say, love your neighbors yourself, and that was 8 times, you're going like, yes, that should be the marker of every Christ follower. There's a conviction. You know it's right. You know it's true. It's a conviction in your mind. You got it? But it's not just a conviction in your mind, a value. It's also the passion of your heart. So it's something, you both think about, but you also feel deeply about if it's a value. It's what you stay up late at night talking about. Going, how do I love my neighbors? How do I get my church to love my neighbors? And you do it not because it's your job or you get a paycheck. You do it because it's a calling. And you love living this out. So that's at the core of a strong culture that loves their neighbors are going to be these values, these biblical values. Conviction of your mind, passion of your heart. But then the second piece, and this is important now, is what I would call narratives. And you're going to have to be intentional about this. And narrative, just like values has 2 parts, narrative also has 2 parts. Story and language. If you're taking notes, story and language. Those are the 2 parts of the narrative, story and language. I've been an observer of this. Every strong church, every strong organization has a unique speak. A unique way they talk about things. Maybe a great way to give an example is Chick-fil-A. All right, the Christian chicken. When you go to Chick-fil-A and you order your Chick-fil-A sandwich and your waffle fries and you say, thank you very much, what do they say back to you? See, everybody knows. My pleasure, right? My pleasure. My son worked at Chick-fil-A for a summer, just for a summer. My wife and I decided to kind of sneak in. You know how you do as parents. I just want to see how it's working and stuff, trying to be a little discreet. But we walk in, and so he's there, and my iced tea got empty, and so he comes over and he says, can I get you a refill? I said, yes, you could. He goes, gets me a refill, hands it to me. I say, thank you. And my son says back to me, and I'm like, what the heck? I've never in my whole life heard my kids say, my pleasure. Where did that come from? So when we get home, I asked, I said, hey, okay, I got to ask you, Caleb. I said, when you gave me that iced tea and I said, thank you, you said, my pleasure. I said, do they train you to say that? And he said, not really, no. It's just kind of like everybody else is saying it, and pretty soon you're saying it. So there will be a certain speak, like around these practices. Begin with prayer, listen, eat, serve, story. If you're around community, the church that I founded, okay, you'll hear people about invite and include. Our mission statement is helping people find their way back to God. Stetzer actually wrote an article on this one time where he came to community, and 12 different times from the moment he walked in to the time he left, he heard someone say, helping people find their way back to God. There's a certain speak that you'll begin to develop, and you want to, I'm telling you, you want to grab a hold of those words and say them over and over and over and over again, okay? Because that speak reinforces those values. It reinforces those values. Not only that language, but also story. Storytelling reinforces values. So you want to get really good at telling stories about people who are living out the values. Give me a little nod. I want to make sure you're with me on this. Yeah? Okay, you want to tell stories about my favorite story. This just happened this summer. It's a new one right out of community. It's kind of crazy. A guy named Andrew came to community. He was far from God. One of his first experiences at our church, he went through a class called Rooted. And as he goes through this class called Rooted, he actually got some training, some equipping on the B.L.E.S.S practices. He also began to discover that some of the people in the Rooted class were going to get baptized. And he was like, well, I think I want to say yes to Jesus. I want to get baptized. But then he had this idea. He's kind of an extrovert. He said, why should I do this on my own? What if I ask other people to join me? And what if I got baptized? He had this idea about getting baptized at a local river. What if I made it really public and celebratory and beautiful? So Andrew, this guy, he's equipped with the B.L.E.S.S practices, begin with prayer, listen, eat, serve, story, and he began to use them. So this is last spring, 3 or 4 months before he's going to get baptized. He's going to get baptized on July 13th. So he starts praying, begin with prayer, right? He decides to pray at 7:13. Since he's getting baptized on July 13th, he prays at 7:13 a.m. and he prays at 7:13 p.m. for other people to also join him to get baptized. So he is working the B.L.E.S.S practice. He's beginning with prayer. And he begins to listen. He listens to his friends as they're talking about different things going on in their life. He listens to his sons. And as he gets opportunity, he asks them, ask the question, would you like to join me? And to his surprise and his delight, other people decide no, they would like to get baptized with him. He begins to call this thing, come to the river. So it starts as like this whisper of an idea. Now it's becoming this step of faith. So he decides this July 13th event where he's going to get baptized in the river, he's going to include eating. So he rents a food truck. He gets an ice cream cart. And he begins to invite his friends, his neighbors into this kind of joyful, communal, spiritual kind of thing. July 13th comes. So he's praying, he's listening, he's eating, he's serving. He begins the whole thing by sharing his story. On July 13th this summer, Andrew, just a guy in our church, hosted an event called Come to the River. He had 500 people show up. There was food shared, testimonies were read, and Andrew and 67 of his friends and their friends got baptized. And that's the picture. Is that awesome? And that's what can kind of start happening when you develop this culture of blessing. I didn't even know it till after the fact. And it's like the spontaneous, repeated patterns of behavior. And you want to tell those kind of stories. When you tell those, see, I told you that story. Now all of a sudden, your mind's starting to work going, oh, okay. And all of a sudden, it makes the values that you believe in the Bible as possible right today. Oh, that's how I love my neighbor. It makes it doable. It makes it achievable. So at the core, let's go back to the culture diagram. At the core, we have the values. Then we have the narrative, language and story. But then we have the behaviors. This is what's so important, okay? This is so important. The behaviors are actually those 5 practices. Begin with prayer, listen, eat, serve, story. Tell your story. Now, as leaders, I want you to take this on. You are the culture creators. You may see yourself as a pastor, you may see yourself in a number of things, but one of the things you also are is a culture creator. This is kind of harsh, but I had one person, a mentor of mine, tell me one time, says, hey, you know what? You're going to get the culture you deserve. Didn't feel really great, but I'm going, okay. So I want you to think about that. You are culture creators. Here's what will happen. If you will hold those biblical values around loving your neighbor, conviction of your mind, passion of your heart. If you will, in language and story, create language and tell stories about people living out those values, particularly from your community, over and over and over again. They used to call it catching them doing it right. You're catching them doing it right, and you're telling the stories. If you'll do that, and then also yourself live out those 5 practices. Just do one every day. And yes, it counts if you just pray for people. Just do one every day. If you will do it and also talk about that, I'm telling you, there will be an integrity there between your values, your narratives, and your behaviors that creates a strong culture. And you'll notice, hey, we're becoming a church that really understands that around here, we love our neighbors. Here's the caution. Here's the caution. If you only hold the values, and you only tell the stories and use the speak, but if you don't, personally as the culture creator, demonstrate those behaviors, live out those 5 practices, what you will, and I see this happen a lot, what you will implicitly, accidentally create, is a culture that says, oh, around here, we only have to hold the Bible values, we only have to talk about it, we don't actually have to do it, because guess what? The woman who's leading this thing, they don't even do it. Does that make sense? So that's kind of a warning, because this thing can go both ways on you. But you don't have to be even great at it. In fact, you can tell stories about how you didn't get it right. Just your effort at it will create the integrity that will actually create a strong culture. I was so excited about the opportunity to share with you. I feel like what we've already heard this morning, we are living in unprecedented times. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that most of us in this room, we've been waiting our lifetime for this kind of awakening, right? And so the question is, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And I think something as simple as the B.L.E.S.S practices, this is how you can love your neighbor in this time of great opportunity. And I'll just leave you with this. Let's don't miss the obvious. Let's don't miss the obvious. All right? Love you guys.